Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Today, we are talking rebuilding and scaling up your SaaS product with Auror. Okay, so let's start. Just going to start with a little bit of housekeeping. Recording will be emailed to you. It's normally on the Friday after the webinar. But we'll have 10 to 15 minutes at the end of today's session for Q&A. Please put them into Zoom Q&A where possible. We will also be streaming this onto YouTube. We will also try and get your questions there as well. So, hello. Today I'm joined by Phil Thompson, co-CEO and co-founder of Auror.co, and Rob Fonseca-Ensor. Hey guys, how are you today?
Hey, good, thanks.
Awesome, thanks, Derek.
Yeah, really excited about today's session. Let's jump in and let's talk about what is Auror.
Yeah, I'm one of the co-founders and co-CEO here at Auror. We've been operating for about 8 or 9 years now. And when we first started, we were looking at this problem around retail crime. So your shoplifting, theft and fraud that occurs in stores around the world. And we saw a couple of interesting things around the size of the problem financially. It's about $150 billion a year is stolen. But then the impact on staff and customers with violence and aggression in store was having a big impact on those workers and also on the customers as well. So those were some interesting problems to look at. But what was intriguing to us is that no one was trying to stop the problem with technology. So we saw that as a really good opportunity to build some technology and build a platform that made it easier for retailers to actually start understanding the problems that were occurring across their stores, and then also work better with police and local law enforcement. So we focused on making it really easy to report all the events that happened in store, and in doing so, we got about 3 times more data than what they'd previously seen. And then we started to help connect the dots on the repeat people, what products they were targeting, who they were working with, what vehicles they were using to help them solve more crime. And then also digitize the entire relationship, I think, with police. So how do you capture evidence in a really easy way? How do you share that digitally? And then ultimately it comes down to how do you prevent more crime? How do you use that data and use the network of people working together to identify the 10% of people who are actually causing 60% of the loss? And those same people are causing a lot of difficulties right across the community into more serious things, because retail crime is profit motivated and it's linked into organized retail crime, gangs, drugs, guns as well. So we saw that as a really interesting problem of how do you apply technology to that space. And from then on, we've been pushed to markets around the world. So we're now in New Zealand, Australia, the US, Canada, and shortly into the UK as well.
That's really cool. I think I once called you guys the Batman of the internet, which I really like. That's one of those things. It's the benefit. You have to laugh at your own jokes, right? So with that, Phil, tell us about your technology story. I think Rob helped here as well.
Yeah. So like I said, we sort of saw the problem, and we knew that technology played an important part in this. And we weren't from a background in retail or in law enforcement, so we had to really just talk to a lot of people and understand the different problems. And they each had unique challenges on either side, but we saw there was a way to bring them together within one platform. So we built the platform from the ground up with customer feedback first and foremost. So every week we were going around talking to stores. Our first rollout to about 80 supermarkets across New Zealand. Tom and I, one of the other co-founders, we personally went out and trained every single store. And that was really useful to understand how they actually use the product. And some things that we thought were pretty simple were actually complex when you saw people do it over and over again the wrong way. So that was really cool to learn. And as we got more customers, we learned how to build a large product, started to build a team as well. But I think like a lot of startups, when you have, we end up with sort of 5 years of new ideas and you start to add on, you realize that the foundation of what you started on starts to look a little bit shaky. And we got to a point where we're working with probably 7 out of the 10 largest retailers in New Zealand. We're pushing into Australia. and things started just to slow down, both in terms of the platform itself, but also in terms of releasing new features and functionality. And we had built up such a great understanding, I think, of the market locally and globally. We started just a question of how can you scale a technology? And when you look at somewhere like the US, for instance, we knew we were having to probably 20x the user count and the store count and the like. We started to really question what's the right way of playing with that technology and potentially refactoring or rebuilding. In saying that, our net promoter score was plus 70, which is world class. Our users and customers were absolutely loving it. So we had this discussion around, short term we could fix a few things and continue to grow the company, but what's our long term position on this? And we knew that we're a long term company. Things were going to take a while. Now is actually the best time to consider a rebuild and start from the ground up with everything we know and all the things we didn't want to do again. And also, I think over 5 years, technology changed so much in terms of the scale of change and progress. There was things that we wanted to probably add on to our technology stack, which we probably couldn't with the way that we built things. So we probably spent 7 or 8 months refactoring code and going, well, there's a few things that started to break and slow down. And we were deploying, we're probably doing the old school way at that point in time of building something for 2 weeks to a month and then trying to deploy that, and things break and we have to revert, go again. And that was, I think, when CI/CD just started to become a bit of a thing. So we spent about 8 months refactoring some things to make sure that we could have a stable platform, which then gave us the opportunity of making the question of, do we rebuild? And about the same time, Rob came into our life and joined the team, and we quickly had a discussion with him of, we think there's an opportunity to rebuild, but we want you to sort of spend a couple of weeks understanding the code base, the team, and really give us some direction on what you think we should do, because we're a couple of non-tech founders, so we had a gut instinct, but couldn't actually tell you exactly what we're building with and what we need to do going forward. So Rob came in as the VP of engineering at that point in time, and had the opportunity of looking at the code and rebuilding the team from the ground up, really. So Rob, I'll bring you in there as a way of saying, what happened next.
Yeah, I guess my initial assessment of the platform that we had, it was serving our customers really well. And really the only problem was it had just grown quite organically in terms of the functionality. And it was it put us in a position where it was quite easy to take a step back from what we had and have a really good look at how it all hangs together. And so when we thought about doing a rebuild, what we were thinking about building was actually a lot simpler than what we had in front of us. And I think that's a big part of why we decided to go ahead with it, is that we could see that looking at what we need out of the platform versus looking at what we'd built, there's a lot of opportunities to simplify things, both for us from an engineering perspective and even from the user's perspective. There were different business rules that different customers had asked for that could actually be, conceptually the same thing. Another really key part of why we chose to go ahead with it was that we wanted to change the sharing model. So to get a little bit technical, Auror's customers have the opportunity to share with each other, and in the old platform, they could either share with no one or everyone. And we knew that we wanted to evolve that going forward. So to be able to build a system where every customer could choose, like for every single other customer, whether they share or not, that was a really fundamental remodeling of everything that was underneath the Auror platform. So another thing that would have taken a very long time to try and refactor, and it was better to just start over.
That was really cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. So what were the benefits of a rebuild, Rob? Can you break those down for the listeners?
Yeah, quite a lot. First of all, the stability. in terms of how often the platform had bugs or crashes or went offline, etc. To be able to just start afresh, knowing what we needed to build, but to be able to build it with very modern cloud native architecture, that really helped to be able to build a new thing the way we wanted. In terms of the functionality, as I alluded to before, simplifying things for the users was really helpful. But simplifying things for our engineering team, I think, was really, really critical. I have a theory, I'm sure a lot of people share it, that every feature you add to a system makes the next feature just a little bit harder. And if you architect it well, then it's only a tiny bit harder. And if the architecture isn't exactly what it should have been, then it can be a lot harder sometimes. So when you get to start over, you get to think about all of those things holistically and how they can hang together in a more modular, cohesive way. And one of the things we knew we really wanted as a property of the new system was to be able to keep on adding more and more features. With the old system, it was normally a matter of months to add pretty simple new features by the time we decided to do the rebuild. And this is typical of any code base. But one of our goals was to make sure that the new platform was going to be very easy to keep on adding new functionality to, and then be a bit more deliberate about the architecture going forward so that that continues to be the case as much as possible. And
So
then,
would you say then that it really allowed you to develop new features much, much quicker than you previously were? Was that really what
yeah,
kind of
definitely.
broke down to?
Yeah. I mean, there was obviously a really big initial investment in the rebuild itself, where we spent over a year just starting over. But then once that was done, the payback from the business perspective was probably just the ability to be a lot more agile about what we were building next. And so that's really borne out over the 2 or 3 years since we did the rebuild. The number of new things we've been able to put into the platform has been phenomenal.
Tell us about some of the new features.
Yeah, so the old system, or the system that we rebuilt, was primarily about customers being able to load intelligence about retail crime into the platform and then sharing it well. One of the biggest new features we built since then is what we call the investigation builder. If you think of a CSI scene where they've got photos on a corkboard with red string all over the place. There are software systems that do that kind of thing, but they're not super usable and they are super expensive. And so for Auror to be able to build that kind of functionality and for that to be able to synergize with the functionality we already had, which was the loading of crime intelligence, is a really powerful thing for our customers and their investigation teams to be able to do that together. It's really saved a lot of time.
That's really cool. So tell us about the journey. How did it, how did you start out, from the code perspective? Like when, how long did you think that journey was going to take? How long did it really take? Just if you get any bits to share there.
Sure. The first time Phil and Tom said to me, what if we just start over? Like, we've been thinking about that. I said, that could be really long, and most people say not to do that. And then they said, but all the platform really needs to do is these things. And they explained the new simple vision. And I said, that could be as little as 3 months. Honestly, that sounds quite easy. Let's go for it. It wasn't 3 months. It turned out there were quite a few more things that we did have to build. But once we decided, okay, let's build it, we did a lot more work on exactly what the new system did need to do, what features customers didn't really use or want, things they thought they wanted, but we could do better. Figured out just really high level scope of all of that. We had to think about cloud providers and whether or not we wanted to stay on Azure. We did do that, and I'm really happy with that decision. And then started building a team and started thinking about the architecture and how to do things differently so that we could keep that agility in the features, but also be more scalable. So we were starting to make inroads in the Australian market, where customers were much bigger than we had in New Zealand. And we knew that eventually we were going to want to move into the US market. So we always had an eye on how can we make sure that this new architecture is going to be more scalable. So we thought about ways to break out the functionality into different places and not have every single part of the system rely on all the data going through one API, or every single part of the system rely on one single database. So with the new architecture, it was a lot more cloud native. We did things like the customer's browser talks directly to Azure storage, uploads it directly there with a SaaS token for security, as opposed to routing it through our API and slowing it down with many bytes of videos being uploaded. Other architectural things were not just using Azure SQL Server for storage, put some things in blob storage, table storage, Cosmos, etc. And then once we had a pretty good architecture, we just got started, and we were growing the team as we went. And it was really cool just seeing different parts of the system being built together. I think in total we had about 14 epics as part of the rebuild, and eventually got through that in about 14 months.
That's really cool. I won't lie, like the dynamic where management come to you about a rebuild, that feels like normally it's the engineers, right, going to management. So
what really blew my mind was when we took that idea to the board, and our chairman said, sorry, not our chairman, one of our board members said, "That's actually a really cool idea. I'll put you in touch with my other CTOs who've done that."
It's almost what we only understood after making the decision and talking to a few other people is it's really quite common that the question is asked internally within the company, but often people don't actually talk about it and externally. So one of the things we did after the rebuild is, Rob actually went and told that story because we wanted to make it known that actually can be a really good decision for a company. And we've seen a lot of other companies make the mistake of just trying to refactor it. And Rob said to us after a couple of weeks in the team, if we keep refactoring and the vision that you've told me you want to achieve, we're 3 years away from actually just getting to a baseline to start that again. So we might as well take the opportunity now of starting from scratch. And I think it's important to call out that we don't regret any decision we made prior to that, because everything we did got us to the point where we had the opportunity and the trust of the board and trust of our customers to actually do a rebuild. And we were open with our customers that, hey, we're going to be doing a rebuild, which means for the next 14 months plus, you might not see any new features from us, but know that we're working a lot of it in the background, and we'll come and share those things with you. And it tees us up for much bigger and better things in the future. And Rob talked before around all of the technical pieces, but even from a real simple example, we made all the inputs a lot more structured. So we had structured data, so we could do things we knew were going to come up in the future around machine learning or AI on that. And so we can now actually use that data to help understand if it's the same people hitting different stores, for instance, and surfacing those matches. So, right across the board, a lot of the functionality that we had understood from our customers early days, the basics really stayed there. And then we thought about what's the long-term vision for the company and the product. And then just started to build those foundations that we're, 3 years later, we're now only really putting into place some of those visible things to our customers.
That's really cool. Because that's the thing, though, you don't hear a lot of people doing it. Octopus did it. It was before my time, but we used moved from RavenDB on Octopus 2.0 over to MS SQL. We also took the opportunity to make it an API first platform as well. So we done it, and I think it was the same idea, about 14 months. It's not a small undertaking. So with that, obviously, it's great that obviously things are moving a lot quicker. You've seen growth. What were the problems? What were the bits you didn't see?
Yeah. For me, one of the biggest problems of the rebuild was just the amount of time that it took. Our customers were quite understanding. They we really stayed in touch about why we were doing it, etc. And there were we did devote some time to making sure that the old platform had one or two really important upgrades as we did the rebuild. So that really helped scratch the itches that they still had. But for me, in terms of building a good product, I really like to take lots of small bets. And so you get feedback really soon on whether or not a decision you made about what to build was a good idea. So now that we've finished the rebuild, we're in a great position where we can turn around features in days occasionally. Usually it's more like weeks, but to spend 2 weeks on something and then put it in front of a customer and say, is this what you're after? That's really good. Whereas to spend 14 months on working on something and then not know if your customers are going to like it or not, that really worried me. It turned out all right. We had, I'd like to think, a really good UX in the rebuild as well. So when we did release the new platform to customers, they absolutely loved it. But yeah, I'd say the biggest problem was just the amount of downtime we had to have. And the new platform, the architecture is such that if we ever did have to rebuild something, it wouldn't be the entire thing. We'd be able to change a part on it. And I think that's a lot safer in terms of the risk of it going wrong. Another problem would have been sorry, lost it.
Even just building on that, I think change management for customers, and we're talking post rebuild, relaunching it. There's a couple of things there where I think with any product, right, when you change things quite fundamentally, even just the look and feel, you're going to get grumblings from your users who have used the same thing for many years. And there's some functionality which we deprecated and said, actually, looking at the data, it's not used enough to warrant us rebuilding that. But you've got that really core user who uses that particular functionality every day. So, sort of hating on you for a couple of months until they forget about it. So there's all that stuff we had to manage with our users and our customers. But I think and actually the other problem I think is that, we spent 14 plus months and then we're just sort of back at the start line again. And we had that mantra internally. We said, we want things to be simple, but also we knew that the rebuild gets us to the start line to then go from there again. So it was important that we had that, it wasn't the end game. It was actually just the thing we had to do to get started again. And we had to really manage from then on our customers. And I think even just being able to deploy, Rob, you might want to talk about this, like deploying into new markets, like, spinning up an instance in the US and the UK. It was a game changer from having one system that we had to do everything from.
Yeah, that's one of the big advantages of the rebuild, actually, was for us to be able to have multiple production environments. Our customers often require their data to be onshore. And also from a performance perspective, both scalability and latency, being able to have a production environment that is close to our users has been really, really good.
That's really cool. So with that, can you jump? See, obviously you're talking about the scaling. How did you scale that globally? Was it just putting, Azure Kubernetes clusters closer to your customers? Was there a little bit more involved in that?
Sure. Yeah. So we're using Azure App Services to deploy our code. And one of the aspects of the scalability is literally that. So rather than serving things from virtual machines, serving things from Azure App Services makes it very, very simple to scale vertically and automatically scale horizontally if you need to as well. So that's something we've had turned on since we did the rebuild, and that's really, really helped. Another part of the scalability is around just really leaning into what the cloud you're on offers you. So if you go lowest common denominator and deploy into Kubernetes or virtual machines or something like that, that's still nice that you're on a cloud and you're not having to manage your own servers. But when you look at the platforms that are being offered, like Azure Storage and the way it's deliberately set up so that your customers can upload directly to it, or polyglot persistence, not just putting everything in SQL Server, or even the fact that SQL Server itself is really easy to scale on Azure. All of those things really, really contributed to us being able to serve a lot more customers, as well as just the fact that we've got multiple production instances in different Azure data centers.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. That's really cool. That's the thing though with cloud native, you can go to things so much quicker.
Mm.
It is really cool. So,
It's been
not
easier to
to
manage as well.
not to steal the thunder a little bit, but the big question, right? How did we help? So tell us a little bit about your DevOps story. You know, what was in place before? How did you improve that? And then kind of what did you move towards?
Yeah, sure. So with the old platform, initially deployments were completely manual. And then as part of the refactoring, I understand the team put Octopus in place, TeamCity and Octopus, to be able to do one-click deploys, ideally with zero downtime. Serving from VMs, it was still a little tricky to actually get zero downtime deploys going. But once it was there, it was there. And, Octopus really helped manage that. Now that we've done the rebuild and we're serving out of Azure App Services, it is much easier to do zero downtime deploys. That's all built into the platform. But luckily, Octopus knows about all of that as well. So we still very happily rely on Octopus to manage the deployments for us. The continuous integration is a mixture of TeamCity and GitHub Actions. But one of the things Octopus really helps with is the fact that we have got multiple production environments. So it's not even a click now. It's just you merge your code in GitHub, and that'll roll out to our QA environment, and then the automated tests will run, and that'll automatically roll out to all of our production environments after that. Octopus is managing that for us, and as you can imagine, every PR merge being a production deploy means we have multiple deploys per day. It's currently averaging about 12. We have 20 some days, and just the way that Octopus handles that and also handles anything going wrong is what really sells it to us. We did experiment with other systems, and they were fine when they worked, but with Octopus, if something does go wrong in a deployment, it's really easy to step in and say, okay, I'm looking into this. Let's retry that step. Let's look at the logs for what went wrong here. And I think we love it.
Me too. You've got to. That's the thing.
Now,
So
you're being paid for that.
well, that's true. That's true. You know, funnily enough, actually, I used to be an Octopus consultant. This is what I did. It was like, and TeamCity was my tool set. TeamCity and Octopus, it came about like luggage. You know, here comes DevOps Derek and his CI/CD pipelines. So yeah, it is quite good. Are you using multi-tenancy for that, or are you just having different environments?
Yeah, we just treat those as different environments. From a customer perspective, everything's tenanted into the one environment. We have different customers from different geographies, all separated. Yeah.
Awesome. That's pretty cool. Yeah, it is nice. It sounds like you've had such a really cool technology story where obviously you've kind of decided you don't hear about it enough. Where people have like, hey, this is great, right? You know, what have we done? How can we improve? You know, one question actually for you: what did you do with the legacy code? Like, with that, did you just leave that running in the background, or is that something? What did you do there with that?
Sure. So our first rollout for the rebuild, that was to our Australian market. That's mainly because Australian customers were a bit newer and were mostly used to the main functionality of Auror. Whereas in New Zealand, we had a few more customers using some more specific functionality that we knew we needed to keep building. So first we deployed to Australia, and that migration of the data from one database schema to another went really well. Didn't take long. And then about 3 months later, we'd finished all of the New Zealand specific features and we rolled that out. So we left the old platform up, but didn't let any users touch it anymore while we migrated things over a weekend. And Once that was done, we left just the database up, turned off all the virtual machines. And that was just in case we had a customer come and contact us and say, hey, this new platform's great, but I've lost my event, or where's the piece of information I put about that gone? So that was there for reference for about 6 more months, obviously scaled it down. And then it's actually just last month that we deleted the deployment out of Octopus, just to tidy things up. But the infrastructure's been down for ages.
Was that a sad day or was that a happy day? Let's be honest.
Well, we called the new system Forks because it's like a phoenix rising from the ashes, and we have a little bit of a Harry Potter theme. And then after that, we decided that Dobby would be a great name for the old system, because Dobby wants to be free.
Well,
So when we celebrated, it was more the final migration of the the New Zealand customers over, and then that was a happy day. Just to hear that it was the migration succeeded, customers were happy, with tiny temporary exceptions, and then deleting it out of Octopus was pretty quiet. Yeah.
nice.
I think everyone was very happy to see the back of the old platform and into the new. So there were no tears shed.
Awesome story, guys. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's jump on over to Q&A. Okay, actually, the first question is for me. David Eric, you mentioned that Octopus rebuild. When was that, and what were the reason benefits of doing it? So this actually happened before my time. I know the story as I do speak to others. I remember getting this story from Paul Stovall. So it was back in 2014. One of the main reasons, we did the rebuild. We went from Octopus I think it was 2.65 to 3.0. The main reason for the rebuild is supportability. At the time, Octopus was using RavenDB. RavenDB is a great, it's a great platform. But one of the things that we found is supporting it was really quite difficult. The original architecture was by Paul Stovall and Nick Bloomhart, who are honestly two of the smartest people I've ever met. But the architecture at the time was also very complicated. There was things like we had to have all our deployment logic on the tentacles. That wasn't great for upgrades. There was a whole bunch of things really. But the main reason is we migrated from RavenDB to MS SQL. With that, MS SQL has, it's been around for a long time. It's going to be here for a long time. There's a lot more people with that skill set. So obviously, database administrators could actually look after the database. So they decided in 2014, and that was Paul, was to re-architect, was to simplify it, and also move over and also make it an API first. But one of the key drivers was the supportability. What basically was happening was it became increasingly difficult to support and also to develop against as well. What we've now done is simplified things. The architecture is much simpler, which means obviously it's much easier to develop against and support. And with the upgrade, we actually addressed all of these issues. Obviously, things now are more mainstream. So what we've actually done there is one of the key things there is the Octopus server and the tentacle always had to go hand in hand. So if you upgraded the Octopus server at the time, you had to upgrade the tentacle. Um, I actually used Octopus from 2012, so that was actually quite a painful upgrade. You had to upgrade the server, then you had to upgrade all your tentacles. You have to schedule time in for that as well. So this is where they came up with Calamari. Calamari is just a console app that effectively it takes the Octopus server and it works with the tentacle. There's the compatibility of our tentacles now are huge, because what you can do is you now just upgrade Calamari rather than that. And a few other things actually came out the back. Halibut was one of them. Nevermore, that was RavenDB goes to SQL Server. But when we started redeveloping it, it took about 14 months. I believe it was July 2015 when 3.0 went out. And alongside that, it also meant that we could also introduce a bunch of new features such as SSH. So that's our first Linux target, Azure Web Apps. We rolled out Delta compression, high availability. Also, we redeveloped the user interface. So it was a long and winding road, just to use the Beatles there, but effectively, there was also bits around the API. So effectively, we actually went along a similar journey with Auror. We took roughly 14 months. We, the same idea. We thought it would take much less, but what actually happened was we had a bunch of people, and it was actually a really good time for them as we redeveloped. They also then got more familiar with the code base as well, and as we've proceeded, things have been much easier. Calamari is much easier. Means that you can use old versions of the Tentacle, and Calamari is what you upgrade, and that's the bit to do there. So yeah, and really, I think as well, the big thing was also to make things easier for our customers. They came along with that journey, and I did it as well. There wasn't always good times back then, but things now are much more are much better, and I think everyone, it was before my time, but I think everyone involved at the time was really happy with it. Okay, on to the next question. Okay, the next question is, I think this one is probably more for Rob, but Phil, please do jump in. Can you speak to the cultural aspects of rolling out continuous deployment?
Yeah, sure. So I really like continuous deployment. I think it's a really important thing to strive for. And aside from the technology, I think the really critical thing is about how you safely deploy small units of code, and also what the benefits are that brings. So we have a really high quality product in terms of bugs. I think we've done 4,000 deploys in the past 12 months, and 4 of those contained bugs that we considered code bugs, where there was actually something wrong in the code that where a developer made a mistake that a QA theoretically could have found before it went to prod. So that change failure rate of 0.1%, I think, is really, really good. And continuous deployment does make that easier because each unit of deployment is very, very small. And so the area in which you have to look for things that could have gone wrong is much smaller, and it's so much easier for everyone, developers, QAs, even beyond that, designers and product managers, to look at what's been changed and find everything that could have gone wrong with it. That has to be coupled with feature flagging as a way to release really small units of change without necessarily having customers see that change. But the fact that things integrate so almost in real time really helps with the quality, I think.
Awesome. So with that, with all the changes and with continuous deployment, and with your failure rate being so low, and also huge congratulations, that's really cool. You must score really highly against DORA metrics. Can you jump into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I really like DORA metrics. You can look at those, and that gives you an indication of how well things have been going in your engineering team, but also the DORA team have proven with data that going forward, as you improve DORA things will get better for your business as well. Just looking at how things correlate for the large number of companies that they've surveyed. So DORA metrics, I think, are definitely something to keep an eye on. The change failure rate is one of those, and for us, 0.1%, I think, is really good. DORA do publish benchmarks, although I don't think they have a way to filter things down to like startups that are already very focused on doing things in a modern way. So I was able to filter down to the technology industry as a whole, and we're elite according to DORA for all of our metrics. Change failure rate across the technology industry is between 0 and 15%. So 0.1, really proud of that.
That's exceptional.
Yeah, and long may it continue. I mean, we're growing the platform, but to be able to keep things where they are will be, I think, something to strive for.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
obviously that's one of the things with the Dora metrics. When you're scoring elite, you're pretty much winning at technology, right?
Yeah, yeah. And the Dora website actually gives you some tips on what to look at next, depending on where you are on the metrics. So that's really helpful. And we don't want to rest on our laurels, but um, so that's the change failure rate, which is related to our deploys per day, I think. So we do about 12 a day. I've seen 20 some days. We just deploy a PR as soon as it's merged to QA, and then automated tests run in QA. And if they all pass, then it automatically promotes to production. The Octopus has really helped with the rules around that. But that means that we can do so many deploys per day, and that really helps with the quality. Then our lead time for changes, again, going from a commit to code being live in production, on average, this is about 18 minutes for us. And as our code base grows and things like that, this has been creeping up. But we really like the ability to just change things. So those 4 times that there were code bugs, we didn't have to roll back the changes because we knew that we could just change the code, fix the bug, and then deploy that bug to production within a very acceptable amount of time. And the time to restore service is literally that as well. So a lot of the time, our average time to restore service in the industry, it's 60 minutes. For us, it was 10. That's not just because we've got quick deploys. With our low change failure rate in our actual code, a lot of our service outages were third-party systems as well. So I can't just credit the time to restore service being so low against our code itself. But it's really helpful to be able to zero in on exactly what has gone wrong by knowing that you don't actually have too many things that got changed in the last deploy.
Yeah. It's funny because I often see people think that they're reducing risk by deploying less often. It's the opposite is true. The more you deploy, that generally means the faster you can go, which means the faster you can react to issues which do happen. So, no, thank you very much. So with the Dora metrics, obviously, what I tend to find is if you score highly and if you're scoring elite with Dora, that normally has a really good effect on people in the team, right? And obviously you've got good responsibility, you can get stuff to production really quickly. With that, how has the team grown and how does the team side look since adopting continuous deployments with your rebuild and scaling?
Yeah, great question. So we have been scaling. When we started the rebuild, we were 4 developers. When we finished the rebuild, we were probably about 10, and today we're more around 30. And so it does get harder to deploy. Only one person can be deploying to production at once, basically. So if you get more and more developers, then it does get harder to make small deployments because either you've got to batch up deploys together so that 7 developers PRs are on one deployment, or you've got to make the deployments faster. And so for us, we've been striving really hard to make the deployments faster because that's where we get all of the goodness around things being really high quality and bugs being really easy to find. So for us, as the team has grown and as the code base has grown, the lead time for changes is probably the metric I'm most worried about. But it really does deliver big value.
Awesome. So obviously, as the team scaled and as you've actually obviously rolled out your platform, how has that scaled? Has it scaled much more than your team, or how does that correlate?
How does the deployment scale, you mean?
Yes. So obviously, as you've done the rebuild, how has the platform scaled? Has it scaled as intended? Have you seen more growth than expected?
Oh, sure. So just the platform's scalability in terms of customers. Yeah. So one of the things that we got to do with the rebuild was spreading across multiple production environments. So that instantly gives us more scale because there's just separate customers in different places. And then the other really critical part of that is by designing things to be cloud native. We really got to lean into all of the scalability that's built into Azure. So being able to dial SQL Server and app services up and down has made that a lot easier. And even if it's just the case where suddenly things are slow, so you dial up your SQL database to a very expensive level, and then you can spend a week actually fixing the performance bug and then dialing things back down has been really, really helpful.
What do you mean?
And even looking at the numbers, Derek, probably before the rebuild, it was probably maybe about 5,000 users we had on the platform. And at the moment, we're north of 50,000 users. We've probably 20x the amount of crime reports coming into the platform as well. So we've been very happy with how the platform is scaled with the company and with our customers. And these are all the reasons why we made the decision a couple of years ago, because of, this was our intention to go into bigger markets with bigger customers. And we knew if we didn't get that right, then you wouldn't have a platform, right? And you'd talking to a lot of our customers, they're really nervous when they go over a certain threshold of stores with other technology rollouts because they're known to break under scale. And we did a recent rollout in the US to more than 5,000 stores in one hit, and we didn't. We saw some things behind the scenes of what we could improve on for the platform itself. But from the customer's point of view, it was absolutely smooth sailing, and they couldn't believe it. And their IT team couldn't believe how easy it was for them and for that scale to come to play.
That is really impressive. It's massive. Like, you're increasing users by at least, like 1,000%, and then, you're 20 times the amount of reports. That is quite the scale. This one's for you, Phil. David is asking how to approach his leader with his recommendation to rebuild. Can you share any tips from a founder perspective?
Yeah, that's a good one, and I think it is definitely different for every company, based on the product they have, the technology, the debt, the market they're in, the competition, the customers. So it's not definitely a one size fits all, but I think what would certainly help to start with is understanding the founder's vision and strategy. I think that's really important because then you can align the concerns you have with that, and I think obviously Rob and us were in a good place because we're asking the question of can we and should we rebuild. But if someone was approaching me about it, if they understood that we wanted to get to 50,000 plus users in a couple of years and be able to take advantage of machine learning and other new technology coming through, you could then structure your discussion around that and saying, well, based on what I'm seeing in the platform right now, we're gonna hit capacity at 10,000 users. And if you expect to get there in a year's time, we need some lead time to rebuild either that part of the platform, or if you do a full rebuild like we do, that's going to take X amount of time. And I think as everyone knows, you've got to then add in a lot of additional time for when things don't quite go right as well. Best case, it takes 6 months, but most likely, talking to other companies, it takes, 12 to 24 months to get it right. And like I said, it goes back to the start line, not necessarily progress. So I'd be thinking like that. It's like, how do you be productive in the discussion around aligning the technology roadmap with the founder's vision and strategy for going after customers. But it does depend on, things like particularly like competition and customers, because in some instances, you might not be able to take 24 months of having no product progress in your market. We're fortunate enough that we had some breathing space and we had some really understanding customers, and that we could take our time to do it the right way.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the key bits, Phil, because that's one of the key takeaways I took away as well, is we also did a rebuild, and to be honest, our customers came along that journey with Octopus as well, and it sounds like it was a fairly similar setup at Auror.
100%. We were communicating before we did anything. One of the good things actually we found in doing the rebuild for new and prospective customers is we were like going into a new market like North America. We were actually taking our designs over to them beforehand and actually getting their help and understanding of, at least from the design perspective, what it looked like and how it needed to be different for their particular market. But what it also meant was that each time we added a new piece to the rebuild, and then when we got to the start line, started adding more on, what they saw was a really responsive company who was moving really quickly, adapting, taking on their feedback, and creating product around that. So it actually really helped us with a lot of our new customers, because they were all talking, each time we see you, when you fly back into the country a couple of months later, you've got these new ideas and you've got things within the platform you didn't have 3 months ago, which we're talking about. So it actually really helped us with those customers and scaling into that market.
That's really cool.
I can probably add one other thing to that as well that's hopefully helpful at a business perspective. Don't try and do a like-for-like rebuild. Don't build exactly what you had from the customer's perspective. We also took the opportunity to fundamentally remodel how things were modeled in our database so that we could enable new functionality that we knew we were going to need. And also on the front end, we had a lot more focus on the user experience. And so when the rebuild was finished, it was simpler, but also the UX was a lot better. So it meant that the customers were really happy with the new thing, as were the management.
Awesome. Sounds like everyone was involved. I think that's the key thing, though. You do have to, you do obviously have to involve your customers, because the rebuild is highly risky and expensive. But when done right, it's it can lead to such massive advantages. So, last question: are you guys hiring?
Definitely. So yeah, we've had a lot of success in the US market recently, and we're trying to grow the team quite a lot. So particularly looking for senior engineers at the moment. But if you go to the auror.co website and click on careers, there's a lot of roles open across the board. In particular, we're in New Zealand, but there has recently been changes with the visa situation in New Zealand. So bringing people into the country is definitely on the cards.
Wait a minute.
So if you want to move to New Zealand and you're not from New Zealand, get in touch, because we can actually help you through the visa process and help you get residency and actually live in our beautiful country. So wherever you are in the world, please do reach out.
That's really cool. I won't lie, guys. I've been to New Zealand. If anyone wants to live in a really awesome country, please do check that out, because it's got everything, right, guys? You've got boats in the north. You've got beautiful scenery down south, and I would check out Milford Sound, probably the most spectacular place in the world. I mean, yeah, let's do some development as well sometimes, but definitely check that out. Okay, guys, unfortunately, that's the end of today's webinar. If you are interested in finding out about how to become an Octopus customer, please reach out to the team at customersuccess@octopus.com. We offer free consultancy to all of our customers. You can reach out to advice@octopus.com, and our customer solutions team will respond to you. And then lastly, please do check out our YouTube, where we post all of our videos, and we'll be posting this webinar live on Friday for that. So just want to say thank you so much for attending. Phil and Rob, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this session. I learned a bunch as well, so thank you so much.
Thanks, Derek. Great to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. And just for the attendees, we do have some webinars coming up. We're back next week with Damien Brady, ex-Octonaut and developer advocate now at GitHub, where we're going to be doing an introduction to GitHub Actions and Octopus Deploy. And then join us on the 9th of March when I chat with Dave Farley, and he gives us his latest talk on engineering for software with Dave Farley. So on that note, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll catch you next time.